And it's important to see exactly how this is resolved in the great trial scene that takes place in Act 4. Portia comes disguised as a jurist in order to rescue Antonio and to break this logjam that Venice is in. And she makes a beautiful speech about mercy. She tries to convince Shylock to relent, to show mercy to Antonio, to give up his insistence on the letter of his contract. And she says this, one of the famous speeches of the play: "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives it, him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway. It's enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute of God himself. And earthly power doth then show likest gods, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which if thou follow, this strict court of Venice must needs give sentence against this merchant here." She tries to convince Shylock to show mercy by talking about mercy as an attribute of God himself. She reminds him of the Lord's Prayer, which of course Shylock, being a Jew, has never prayed. She says that mercy must season justice. That's when earthly power is most like the power of God, not when strict justice is enforced, but when mercy seasons justice. But this doesn't convince Shylock. "By what compulsion must I show mercy?" he asks. "Nobody can make me show mercy." And Portia agrees. Bassanio is there in the court, and he says to the Duke, "Ignore this contract. Do a little wrong to accomplish a greater right. Overturn a valid contract. Overturn the law at this small point so that you can establish justice." And Portia says, "It must not be. The contract must be honored. The law must be upheld." This speech doesn't convince Shylock. Her pleas for mercy don't convince Shylock. What finally turns the tables on Shylock is that he gets trapped in his own insistence on the law. "I stand here for law," he says. "I stand here for the bond." Portia asks, "Do you have a surgeon present to stop the bleeding in case he starts bleeding to death?" Shylock says, "Is it in the contract? It's not in the contract. I'm not bound by it." He insists on the letter of the law. In open court, he refuses twice, 3 times, 30 times his original loan. He doesn't want money back. He wants his pound of flesh, and he gets his knife and is ready to cut. The Duke of Venice has given him permission. Portia has argued in favor of the contract. And just as he's about to cut into Antonio's breast, she says, "But soft. This contract, this bond, gives you not one jot of blood. Take your pound of flesh. But if you shed one drop of Venetian blood, then you come under the condemnation of the law as a murderer." It's in the contract. There is no blood mentioned in the contract. Portia traps Shylock by insisting on the letter of the law even more strictly than Shylock the Jew. She doesn't bring mercy by dismissing the law. She doesn't bring mercy by getting rid of the law. She brings mercy by insisting on the enforcement of the very letter of the law. I think Merchant of Venice is a deeply Protestant play in all kinds of ways, but especially here, a deeply Pauline play. When Paul asks the question, do we negate the law by the gospel? He says, no, never. May it never be. Me genoito in the Greek. No, we establish the law. Redemption doesn't come by God ignoring the law, but by God enforcing the law, even enforcing the punishment of the law on his own Son. And we have a reflex of that kind of gospel in the play. Shakespeare has brilliantly set up this final trial scene so that the letter of the law is enforced. But the letter of the law is enforced in a way that opens up the possibility for mercy and opens up the salvation of Antonio from Shylock, and for an Elizabethan audience, the salvation of Shylock by bringing him out of Judaism into the Christian church. I think you could summarize the message of this trial scene and of much of the thrust of Merchant of Venice with Paul's statement that God is both just and the justifier of those who have faith in Jesus. Shakespeare has given us a play that shows justice opening up into mercy, the letter of the law being enforced so that mercy can season justice.